All right, so welcome again, everyone. Let me just start with introducing myself and my co-presenter. So as you all know, today's topic is cognitive and sensory perspective in autism intervention. My name is Divya. I'm a clinical psychologist working in Nafsology Psychology Center. I have more than 14 years of experience in adult and child psychology and in various aspects of mental health disorders and also psychological assessments for children and adults. Samuel?
Yeah, can you hear me? Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Samuel Donald, and I'm the lead occupational therapist here at the Speech Clinic. And I have experience of 7 years with pediatric care. And I've worked with most of autistic kids, ADHD kids, and the kids on the spectrum and neurological condition. And I specialize in accommodating them in school and helping them in their independence. Yeah.
All right. So today, this is the agenda of today's webinar. So what we actually had thought is a lot of webinars are very commonly coming up with, the symptoms of autism and autism awareness, and people read up a lot about the basic symptoms of autism. So we thought of, taking a little bit of different perspective to what most of the people know about autism. Right. So everyone knows about the basic and common symptoms of autism. That is, as you all know, it's a social communication disorder, and anything related to communication gets affected in these children. So it may be eye contact, it may be speech skills, it may be communication skills, expressive language skills. So assuming that people who are attending this webinar understand the basic symptoms of autism, we thought of taking it into a different perspective, that is the cognitive aspect, which is relatively less spoken about, and the sensory issues or sensory difficulties experienced by these children. And what are the required interventions that would make their life much more feasible, much more, they can be more adaptable to their life, right? So let's start off with the cognitive symptoms. Okay, so it's very common that in children with autism, we see a lot of cognitive skills. I want to start with their strengths. So let's start with their cognitive strengths, and then we'll go into the difficulties, because it's important for us to highlight both, right? So when we talk about the cognitive skills, it varies in every child. Like if you see one child having a cognitive difficulty, like say, for example, attention, right? Not every child will have the same symptom or in the same degree as another child, right? So if it is even varying, or if it is present or absent, we cannot say that, okay, my child does not have attention problem, then probably my child does not have autism. So even if some kids show some symptoms or they don't show some symptoms, it does not mean that they have or they do not have autism. Okay, so in the course of this webinar, you hopefully you'll be more clear on what you should be looking for, because early intervention is something that we really suggest, because we have seen a lot of improvement when the intervention is in the earlier ages. Okay, so let's talk about the strengths. So you might have seen that some children with autism have a lot of attention towards one particular aspect or one particular task, right? So they may be really good in memorizing a vast amount of information about a certain subject. So they're really good at that. For example, I had one child who, he was in grade 1, but he could read content which is even of grade 4 or 5 without being trained to read it. So that was his ability. So that's a cognitive strength that the child had had. It's a different thing that whatever the child was able to read, he could not comprehend, but his reading skills were really good. Okay, so that is one aspect that they might be very, very good in memorizing or attention to one task very much in detail, right? So again, I'm repeating this, that a child may or may not have these abilities. Cognitive challenges would be mainly, it's a very, very important aspect that's called as a theory of mind, which I would be explaining what it is in the coming part of the session. So it is one of the executive functioning skills. Okay, so we call as the cognitive functions, it's a very broad term in which the executive functions like thinking, memory, working memory, attention, everything comes under the executive functions. Okay, so I'll just first start off with autism and executive functioning skills. Now, these are the set of cognitive skills that help to regulate us, uh, control and manage our thoughts and behaviors. It's common for children with ASD to have difficulty with the following. So these are the different areas of cognitive skills or executive functioning. First is planning. So you might have observed that children with autism have a lot of difficulties in planning a task. Say, for example, if you're planning to go out, okay, so they have a difficulty in, okay, I need to wear my clothes now, I need to wear my shoes now, right? So this kind of planning, or even sometimes, see, again, I'm saying some children with autism are really good with puzzles, right? But some, on the other hand, because it has a lot of planning involved, it's a little difficult for them to complete a puzzle. So planning of any sort, when you see that even in the classroom settings, you might observe that organizational skills, like, okay, if this class is over now, in the next class, what should I be planning? What books should be on my table? Or if it is a math class, if it is a geometry class, okay, what are the equipments or things that I require for this class? To think and plan, it's a problem. Now, working memory. Now, what is working memory? Now, working memory involves the ability to hold the information in the mind for a longer period of time. Say, for example, you're giving 3 or 4 step instructions, like, okay, keep your bag, go to the washroom, clean your legs, come back, have a glass of water. Okay, so this is like a 4-step command or a 3-step command. So when you give such long statements wherein the child has to remember that he has to keep his bag, he has to go to the washroom, he has to wash his legs, come back and have his water. So the whole process of having or holding all these informations at one go, it's a problem, right? Or say, for example, if a child is reading a passage, and after reading a passage, there will be a question related to the passage. So they will read the passage, but then information that the passage has given, that is a difficulty. So that is a part of the working memory, wherein it holds the information for later use. It can be even for, for example, if I give in adults' life, right? So if you're cooking, a working memory would be that the whole process, all the stages of, if you're cooking a vegetable, okay, first this goes in, then this goes in, then this goes in. So all this is registered in your working, right? Next. Okay. Next is initiating. Now, children with ASD have a problem in initiating tasks or to come up with ideas on their own. So when you talk about, if probably they are playing if you see children playing in a group, they have this task of, okay, let me start first, or some idea comes up, okay, I want to do something, or I want to paint something. So this task of initiating, it may not be related to a group setting, but it can be an individual's life as well, wherein you are initiating to do a task. So that is also a deficit, right? Next comes the attention. Okay, so attention with ASD, again, it's some children with ASD have, like I already mentioned, that they have enormous ability to focus on something, but often they struggle to shift their attention from one task to another. So if they are preoccupied, if it's a very common symptom in younger age group, that wherein children with autism, probably they would love cars. Okay, it's an example. Not all children who love cars will be, I'm not saying that they have a symptom of autism, but they will insist on getting cars, but then they will not use the car like how other children would use, like they would just roll. They wouldn't do that. They would either just stack up in an order, and they would just constantly be attentive and focusing on only stacking the cars, or they would be constantly focusing on the wheels of the car. Okay, so and then when you ask them to shift their attention, or you're giving some other task, it's very difficult for them to shift their attention from one task to another. Now this again becomes a very big challenge when they are in a school setting, as like obviously from one class or from one subject to another subject, to shift their attention, it's very difficult. Okay, it can also be difficult to filter information to decide what to pay attention to. Like I said, uh, there are like multiple stimulus that is happening around us. Like even when I'm talking, there are too many things happening around you, right? There may be a honk, there may be a bus going by, or there may be somebody is cooking. So there is constant external stimulus that's happening. So children with ASD have a difficulty in filtering what is required. Okay, what is the information that I need to attend to? That is, now you're listening to me, so that's important. So it's difficult for them to see, this is important, let me listen to this. And just your brain filters out the other stimulus that's happening, and it helps you focus only on what is required. So children with ASD have a difficulty in filtering what is required and what is not. Control emotions and behavior. So this is one of the common symptoms wherein children lack impulse control. Now, what do we mean by that? Now, as you all know, that children with ASD have difficulty in expressing, or they cannot, tell you what they are experiencing. So what happens is that they show in a very impulsive and very different kind of emotional reaction. Maybe they'll start walking, or they might start flapping their hands, or they might start. Some children also bang their heads. So in the emotions that they cannot control, it may be for things, because it's mainly the expression part is a major concern. So you might see that children with autism, when they are a little aggressive, they might start banging their head, or they might start spinning or flapping their hands when they're really happy, or so they have difficulty in controlling their impulses, uh, and their actions or behaviors may be very different from how any other child would show of their age. Flexibility, that is, when for example, if there is a change in a child's life, maybe you have changed your house, or maybe the child's bedroom has changed, so it gets very difficult for them to adapt to it. Even the routines, for example, you might have observed that the child goes from Tuesday to Friday, the child is fine going to the school, but then when there is a weekend, and again when there is Monday, it's very difficult for them to get back to their routine. So they don't like these changes in routine. So you might see there is a when we do the intervention also, there is a huge gap, or there is a lot of regression in children when they go on for vacations or when they have breaks. So flexibility is a concern. So either it might be even small changes like change in their sleeping time, changing their waking up time. So even these small changes make a lot of discomfort, and it's very difficult for them to adapt to the changes. Let's talk about the theory of mind. Now, it is the ability to understand that others' thoughts, feelings. It's for example, I don't know what you are thinking, or I don't know what you are feeling. Okay, that is basically the theory of mind. Now, it's the ability to understand that others do not share the same thought and feeling like I do. So for them, they feel that everybody is feeling the same as I feel. They do not know that if I hit somebody, for example, how does that other person feel? Okay, so if that child is hit or if that child is hurt, he may not have any associated emotion like pain or hurt or crying or sadness, that kind of emotion. But then they do not understand that others may or may not feel the same. Okay, that is called the theory of mind. It's basically your understanding of how others would be feeling in the situation. So it is also the ability to recognize that others and their own feelings. So they do not understand if anybody is sad, they don't recognize that they are sad, and what are they supposed to do? Either they go and give a hug or give a kiss. So others' mind, others' perspective, others' feelings and emotions is a challenge. It usually, when a normal child is growing, this is an ability which naturally develops when the child is around 4 years of age. But its foundation begins very much in infancy. So you can see that a lot of kids, when they are 2 years or 2.5, 3 years, is also they understand how others are feeling. So they can recognize the emotions of others, or they may know, they can understand that, okay, if I push somebody, how is that person going to feel? But children with autism, this development is not there. Okay. Children with ASD may believe that others know what they are thinking and feeling, and I have trouble seeing things from others' perspective. So, like already mentioned, they believe that everybody knows how I'm feeling. So that is how when people don't understand. Now, for example, if the child wants food, he's hungry, for example. But children with ASD, they may not be in an expressive language. They may not be able to ask that I want food. So they might start fidgeting, or they might start being aggressive, trying to think that why this person, the other person, is not understanding that I am hungry, because they feel that everybody knows what I'm feeling. Challenges with the theory of mind are the main reason children with ASD struggle to navigate social interactions. Now, if with this explanations of what is theory of mind, I'm sure you might have understood, if you can just reflect on how theory of mind is important to in social interactions. Now, if I am talking to somebody, if I say something rude, after some time I'll realize that, okay, probably that person did not feel good about it, right? His feelings might have hurt. So this is very, very important in any social relationship. So if a person does not develop or have a good theory of mind, people may misunderstand him. They might not be in a good social gathering, because obviously you will start losing relationships. So this is one of the main reasons why children with ASD struggle with social interactions. Now, there are a lot of misconceptions or overlap of symptoms that we have observed, which is probably the reason why children with autism do not receive an early intervention. Now, why I'm talking so much about early intervention is it will see it's like when the plant is smaller, right? When you want to give it a proper shape, the intervention or the way you treat it, it would take the shape much faster compared to you trying it when the tree is little more firmer or bigger, right? So it's the same way that the flexibility of the brain is much more when the child is in much younger age. So you will see the changes or the interventions working much faster when the intervention is given much faster, much earlier in life, right? So some of the reasons why it misses out, or parents miss out on observing these symptoms maybe, um, one of the major symptoms of autism is speech delay or speech difficulties, right? So people think that, okay, my child is having probably a normal speech delay, which he would outgrow eventually after some time, right? So this is one of the reasons how and why autism cannot be identified in early years, because people think it's a normal speech delay, which it is not. It has a lot of other aspects also. Now, on the contrary, there are a lot of parents that I also receive in my center that they self-diagnose their children. They say that my child is not speaking. He is 3 years of age, and he has autism, right? So the speech delay is not the only symptom of autism. Of course, it is one of the major symptoms, but it is not the only symptom, right? There are a lot of kids who have speech delay, which is a developmental delay, right? So like the milestone delay. But that's why it's very important that you or the clinician should identify if it is a speech delay or if it is a symptom or part of autism spectrum disorder. Okay. Other reason why it gets unidentified early is that I have seen a lot of parents coming to me saying that, which is later when the child is 5 and 6 years old, that no, we were thinking that, even the father had a delayed speech, even the father didn't maintain good eye contact, even the father was very shy, and that's how the social communication skills were not good when he was younger. So, which even my child grandparents have told me that no, he will outgrow his father also was the same. So, it's not true for everybody, right? So it's always better to get evaluated than miss out on those early precious years of intervention. So if you get an evaluation, your clinician or your psychologist will definitely tell you that if you need intervention or if it is just a genetic kind of temperament of the child. So just be aware of that. When with like I've already mentioned about the executive functions, that is attention skill was one part of it. So sometimes parents misunderstand ADHD to autism and autism to ADHD. Okay, so because the symptoms may be overlapping. So there are a lot of other disorders as well, or other developmental delays as well, which have an overlapping symptom with autism. So it's always better that you get clarity on what exactly your child is going through, right? So ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So when we talk about the attention skills and they're focusing mainly on some things and shifting their attention is difficult, these overlap with the ADHD symptoms as well. So children who have autism may or may not have ADHD. Children who have ADHD, of course, may or may not. Right? So we cannot say that the symptoms cannot be generalized. Every disorder has a specific characteristic set of symptoms, which it's important to see or evaluate in all the parameters. Okay. Now, lack of social exposure. Now, this is very, very common problem that has come up post-COVID, wherein there is a set of children who were born during that COVID time or post-COVID time. There was not a lot of online exposure and very less social exposure. So that's how it is termed as virtual autism. The symptom looks same as autism, wherein their social interaction is very poor. They do not maintain eye contact. It's mainly because of extreme exposure to uh, system, that's computer or laptop or social media. So wherein the actual life situations of how one-to-one person interaction happens, the child does not get to see that because there is lack of social exposure, right? So it has a very thin line. So it's always necessary that you evaluate and see if it is virtual autism, which also requires intervention. Because when the child grows and even though it is not a neurological autism, the symptoms are the same. So it also requires early intervention. But of course, you will see the effects much more because it's not a neurological deficit. Also, a lot of sensory processing disorders have overlapping symptoms with autism. So we'll have an elaborate explanation on sensory disorders or sensory difficulties in children in the next half of the session. So even they have, if for example, if one child is too sensitive to sound, we cannot say that the child has autism, right? So we have to see, that's how psychological assessments are very important. So if at any point you feel that there is some delay or there is some difficulty that you're observing, please contact your psychologist, a clinical psychologist. So they, with their psychological assessments, they will give you a much clear idea on if this is an autism spectrum disorder and what kind of interventions are required for this child, or if it is a milestone delay, it is a speech delay, it's a sensory processing disorder, what exactly it is, or it is just a normal, it's a temperamental thing. So to get more clarity, please visit a psychologist who will do a proper, elaborate assessment. Okay. So, because I get a lot of parents who read up a lot on autism and they, like I said, they self-diagnose their kids. So, or they might just think that, no, it's not part of the autism spectrum. So, not all symptoms would be seen in a child, but still it can show traces of autism. So please have a detailed evaluation from a psychologist. Now let's come to the cognitive intervention part. Okay, now cognitive intervention, it's the most important or the most, of course, others also are very, the ones that I'll be naming are very effective. But neurofeedback is something that has recently come up a lot, which is showing a lot of progress. It mainly would help in developing the attention skills and the executive functions which are lacking in a child. Now, what neurofeedback does is you have around 19 electrodes that are attached to your head, like you see in the picture. So these are non-painful, non-invasive kind of treatment. So first, there is something called as a brain mapping done in neurofeedback, wherein the child's executive functions and the whole brain functioning is mapped, and they get to know when they compare it to a normal child of his or her age, what are the executive functions which are deficit in the child with ASD, and then computer-based training is planned for the child. Now, I cannot give you exact, kind of training or plan for generally for any child, because brain mapping is important to see which aspect of executive function is the child needs training in. Okay. So you can see there is this list which is there on your right side, which the process for it. So I'm just going to rush now because we are running short of time. A lot of brain training tasks, of course, are very, very helpful in cognitive enhancement of the child. Now, I'll just give you two or three quick interventions that can be done at home. One is that you can just keep a log of clay, which is a little hard clay, and you place a couple of sticks, small sticks on the table. So you keep the sticks in little distances, two sets of sticks in two different. Uh, it can be like a matchstick, or it can be, just be careful with the toothpicks so they don't hurt themselves. So you keep two sets of it, maybe 20-20 on both sides, and you ask the child to pick up from his right hand and fix it. Pick up from the left hand and put it stick it on the clay. Okay, so what it does is eventually this is very, very important where the child understands right left concept. So then you keep changing the hand. Okay, again left. Now next again left hand, then right hand. So you keep changing the commands that you give. Okay, so of course it requires a lot of training. You start off with normally asking the child to pick up and put, because there may be a lot of motor related difficulties as well. Another task would be that you use a plain sheet of paper, put red dots on both ends of the paper, and you just pick up uh, you know any colored bindis. Usually red color is it's more brighter, so you can take stickers also, that's also fine. So you ask the child to pick up from his left hand and put it on the paper. So where you have marked the paper, so you have to put uh, dots, bigger dots, and the child has to stick on it. So make sure that it has to be kept on the face level. Because of this, even the eye contact also gets better. Okay. There are a lot of social cognition remediation programs, which of course there should be a lot of detailed evaluation of the child's uh, executive and cognitive functions, based on which the remediations are planned. Now, social cognition is mainly when it is done usually in the group settings, which will help the child develop its kind of cognition or communication skills. So in a social setting, what is required to develop, how cognition plays a role in communication skills. So this is planned based on the child's needs, okay, and the intensity or the severity of autism. So every child, we cannot use the same activities. It depends on the severity of autistic symptoms. So like in an assessment, it will be more clear if the child has mild, moderate, or severe symptoms of autism. So based on that, the plan has to be prepared for the child. So it's like an individual, how in the schools they do an individual education plan, right? The IEP, wherein each child, now, so if there are 4 kids with autism in one class, the goals wouldn't be the same, right? Every child has a different plan. So same way, when you plan even the cognitive enhancement therapy, it has to be different for each child. Okay, so this was just a basic idea of cognitive aspect of autism. Now I would like Samuel to just go ahead with the sensory aspect.
Thank you, Ms. Divya. I think it was wonderful, and it was an eye-opener for myself to run over the cognition and how it works. So, good afternoon, everyone, and my name is Samuel. I'm the occupational therapist, and I would be just brushing through how sensory system works and a sensory perspective on cognition and how it helps a child to regulate and to carry on with his day-to-day living. So in order to know about sensory systems, in order to know sensory processing, we need to know about sensory system. And we have around like 5 senses. Those are the basic senses. They're like the touch, taste, your hearing, your vision, and your auditory. And apart from that, Ms. Divya, can we have the second slide, please? Thank you. Yes. The smell. So these are the basic 5 senses which we have, which we all know. The other three senses which we are not familiar with are the vestibular sense. Basically, it's found in the inner ear, and it's called the movement sense, or it helps in the balance and coordination of body movements. It helps in muscle tone, and it maintains your balance. Then the other sense is the proprioceptive sense, which is known as the joint position sense or or your body awareness sense. Both these senses work together hand in hand, which helps us later on. We'll get to see the slide, which would help us to maintain proper arousal level and our coordination with the environment. And then we have the interoceptive sense. Interoception is nothing but it is inside your body, and that is the one which tells you if you're hungry, if you need to go use the washroom. Like it would tell you when not to. So that's what an interoceptive sense would do. In order to understand this even more better, we have a triangle called the learning pyramid. Basically, learning pyramid is widely used by almost all the occupational therapists these days, and we use this to explain to the parent how our sensory system works. So we have four stages in this. Like we have the base would be the central nervous system. On top of that, we would have our sensory system, where you have your olfactory, visual, auditory, gustatory, tactile, vestibular, and proprioception. The tactile, vestibular, proprioception is the base, which is very, very important, without which the corresponding senses would work. Once the sensory system is regulated, the child would develop automatic sensory motor development, perceptual motor development, and the cognitive. Since the topic is cognition today, the cognitive part is in the top of the pyramid, where the child would go through all the parts of the sense of the development to reach cognition. In case if child is having any sensory deficit in the sensory system, they would have issues corresponding to the motor development and their cognition. The next thing is we need to know how these sensory systems work and how does our body process these senses. So sensory processing is defined as an organization of sensory information from the body and external world that allows a person to interact effectively with a physical and social environment. So the best example for this would be, for example, let's say we are making coffee or tea in the morning, and our body is covered with skin, and skin contains loads of tactile receptors or touch receptors. And the moment you know the pot or the kettle is hot, the moment you go closer to the kettle, your body is going to sense. Our sensory system are very inquisitive. They always want to know what is happening. So they're aware of our environment. The moment you go closer to it, your receptors are going to tell it's hot. And these senses would be sent to your central nervous system, and your nervous system would tell if it's safe or not safe to say. So if it is not safe, it's too hot and you have to move away, your central nervous system immediately reacts and it connects to the vestibular system, and it tells the vestibular system to move, since it's a movement sense. And your joint position sense or your body awareness sense by the proprioceptor will tell you to move your hand away. So you are away from danger. But when it comes to autistic kids, can we have the next slide, please? Yeah, when it comes to autistic kids, these senses are a bit over or understimulated. So it is a bit difficult for them to, process the information or find out, like, is it safe for them? Because they're already seeking for some other sense, because they're most of the time dysregulated. So it is going to affect their daily living. So what do we do? How do we fix this? As an occupational therapist, this is my take on how we work on this. Most of the sensory issues the autistic kid would have, like Ms. Divya just told, they would jump, they would spin, and spinning is spinning off. Like every parent who comes in for an occupational therapy session during our assessment, the first thing they would say, or they would report us, would be like, my child is spinning car wheels. He likes to spin things. He would like to see spinning objects, and he would hand flap. These are the very common things. And most of the time, you would end up having kids with meltdown and kids showing frustration and not even responding to their name calls. Like these are the basic autistic signs we would go through. To help them, we need to regulate these senses. To regulate these senses, can I have the next slide, please? We have something called a quadrant, which most of the occupational therapists use to evaluate the child. Once, as a parent, you fill in a sensory profile, which is given by us, and this would help us understand where your child lies. So horizontally, we have the self-regulation portion, and vertically, we do have the neurological threshold. For example, let's say we have a kid who's jumping and he's sensory seeking. And once the child is seeking for, vestibular movement because he's jumping, and vestibular movement is the one correlating to jumping, we would see that he's seeking for that, but at the same time, he's avoiding auditory. He's not listening. He's avoiding even vision. He doesn't want to see. He's not giving eye contact to you. He's not listening to the commands you're giving to him. So he's finding it really hard to focus or to regulate himself. So as an occupational therapist, when you what we try to do is we try to see what the child needs, how much input the child needs, and try to get him to an arousal level, like an optimal arousal level, where the child would be able to engage in the task at hand. So in order to get the arousal level, first we saw sensory processing, how it works. Now, once the sensory information is into your brain, now we need to know how sensory regulation works. So sensory regulation is a crucial process through which our nervous system integrates and adjusts sensory inputs to provide optimal level of arousal. When arousal levels are optimal, so we have a very good grasp on uh, focusing in doing our day-to-day chores. When our sensory system is regulated, the navigating through the world is going to be very smooth. So here we have two posters where why sensory regulation is very important. So when the child is dysregulated or he's not regulated, and they would have difficulties in paying attention, their focus would be very bad, and they wouldn't even sit down in class. You would have loads of complaints. This, when they're not regulated, they would show these, and this would result to behavior, and behavior like they would have meltdowns, they would be, they might throw tantrums, or they would just cry around, and this would even result in bad emotion. Well, once we start regulating the senses, like I said, we're going to regulate the base of the triangle, the pyramid. You would have good focus, you would have a very balanced emotion, and their arousal level will be optimal. So their focus and their concentration while working would be good. And when there's a transition in activity or transition in place, or they have their fixed routines, it wouldn't be that difficult for us to change rather than having a meltdown over there. So that would be the importance of regulation. And here we have how does a sensory input help cognition? Because cognition is top of the pyramid. We need to know how does sensory inputs help in cognition. So here we have a kid playing with slime. So the kid is basically exploring. So most of the kids, when kids start playing, the first stage of play would be exploratory play, sensory-based play, where the child explores everything around him. And at this stage here, we have a child playing with the slime. So slime, he's going to look at the color of the slime. He's going to feel the texture of the slime. He might even smell, he might even taste it. Kids do often come up with that, and they would really, really want to know how it looks and how it feels, because it is very interesting for them, and they're just equally inquisitive. So for the first time when he plays with the slime, he's going to have motor planning. You can see the slime is stuck to his fingers, and the child is going to figure out how he's going to remove it. Either the child would find a way to remove it, or they would be aversive, and they would present with some tantrum at times, and they would try to move away from it. So this is the first time. So this goes and registers in the nervous system, I mean in the brain for the first time. So this is the first time he's working with it, so it is registered. So there's a small link to a cognition there. The second time the child experiences or he tries to interact with it, he knows how it is. He knows how the slime feels. He knows how it's going to smell. He does also know how it sounds. And if there are different colors of slime, sometimes autistic kids do have preferences in colors, and they would pick that particular color to play with and more. So this is like a learning experience for the child. The more learning experiences we give to the children, I believe that they are building more cognitively, and their brain, because they're very young, their brain can learn new stuff, and they're easy to incorporate many things in it. So we like to call something, we use a medical term called neuroplasticity, or it is the superpower of brain, or the elasticity of the brain or the neuron, to form new neural pathways for a kid to learn new things. So it helps them rewire their cognition part and their sensory, and they're able to regulate it most of the time. So neuroplasticity is nothing but, can we have the next slide, please? Yes. Neuroplasticity is nothing but the ability of the brain to rewire itself and form new connections, where neurons and neural networks are altered to adapt behavior as a consequence of new information. So we saw the kid, he's touching the slime for the first time, and that is being formed as a neural pathway. And next time when he touches it, and he's able to recall memory, like the cognition is working there. Like Mrs. Divya spoke, she spoke about how memory works. And one of the things as OT we always see, and I mean I see most of the time, is I see how kids react to their previous experiences. So for example, the aversive, they don't want to touch, they don't like it because they're already used to it, they would show it immediately. If they like it, they would seek for it, they would play, they would just apply, and they like to have it a little bit more messy. And we as OTs, like we would have sometimes a little bit of trouble transitioning them from one activity to another one. So here are some strategies which we usually do for kids, those who are anxious. And I'm just going to run through a few. Like when you have an anxious kid or kid who's overstimulated, the best or the most effective way as an OT we do is give them deep pressure massage. Touch is to calm them down. Like I would always have them give them a good pressure when I hold them, so they feel a little bit more relaxed. And most of the time, we would use a therapy ball and we would sit on them, or a gym ball to sit on them and rock them slowly front and back, so that they feel relaxed, they don't feel anxious, they know it is a safe zone to play, and they don't pop up with any behavior. The other one would be, yeah, the other strategy would be when they're understimulated, when kids are not even alert, they're a bit lethargy and they don't want to move around, would be like we would initiate an angular movement of swing. We would bounce on the ball a little bit, on vertical axis a little bit faster, so that they are a little bit aroused. And we would use something called a Wilbarger protocol, and where we would brush the child's extremities a bit fast so that they're a little bit alert. So we saw how sensory processing works and how sensory regulation takes place, and when the child is dysregulated, what could potentially happen. This is just a small view, which most of the parents come up for an OT therapist, and they would ask this question: will my child start writing in 2 months? Is it going to be easy for him to start talking? And of course, I really respect it. The thing is, most of the parents, they're really anxious. They really want to go around like, okay, when does this get over? Coming to an OT session or helping a child with autism is uh is a, how do you like, I would like to put it, it's like a bigger approach, where we need to understand how the child is, where the child's sensory level is. When the child is still seeking for sensory stimuli, he's going to have hard time figuring out other things around him. So there's an example I would like to give. So a few years back, I worked with a kid. The kid was running around and he was into all fidgety behavior. We found it really hard. The mother's only query was, "I want him to go to school in 3 months. Please fix his handwriting." The child didn't have name call response. The child didn't have what do you call instruction following, like not even single step commands, and he was seeking for so much vestibular. We worked overtime to get, but more than working with the child, it is working with the parent. Because the child is with the parent for 24/7 the whole day. And we have an hour or 45 minutes with the child, and we give strategies for the child to regulate, and we would give the parent to work it at home. So we should, as parents or as therapists who is listening today, I will always say this. If you have a child having a hard time in sensory input, it could be difficult for the child to focus on the task at hand. If they're unable to focus on the task, how can we expect them to do complex function? We're trying to achieve independence in the child. We're trying to achieve higher functions. Like cognition is the highest, most function which we can achieve. So we need to give the space and the time for the child to cognitively respond, receive the input, and respond accordingly to it. Yes, of course, in this process, we're going to have loads of meltdown and we're going to have loads of new things coming up. But it is up to us to stand next to the child and tell, it's okay, I'm there for you, I'm going to work it out with you. As an OT, that's what we do. And we bring them about. Coming to the end of the presentation, I just want to make it short. We need to know the kid completely. And in order to know, we need to do peer assessments for it. Do we have something called a sensory profile where we'll know where the child falls in and correspondingly. First thing we would do as an OT in an OT session would be best is to get the child as early in as possible because the younger days are the most flexible days where the child learns more. So neuroplasticity occurs even faster and the child is able to receive new inputs. First, we need to work on regulation to improve arousal levels, then give them learning opportunities. Learning opportunities these days, I feel no one are giving to the child. Like many parents fail to do so. I do understand their work, and the kid puts up a meltdown and they forget doing it. But I would always request parents when they come meet me, I would say, give them the opportunity to learn. It's okay if it's positive or negative. They wouldn't know because they're able to I would always see kids pull their parents to go get a bottle of water, or if they want a favorite book. If the child is able to pull you to what it needs, I mean, for the things it needs, the best thing would be like give them the opportunity to request for it, so they're able to use words or maybe gestures or look at you, and you're building a lot of rapport with the child when you do so. And next is we need to grade tasks accordingly. Like, there's something called task analysis, which as OTs we do. For example, we're going to give crawling for the child. What is the purpose of giving crawling? What is the purpose of giving an obstacle course? What am I trying to achieve for the child? So the same way, when a home plan or as OTs, we give a lot of home plans and sensory diet to the parents for them to follow. When you take it back home and your child doesn't comply for the home plan or the sensory diet we are given, the best I would say is like any play you engage with the child, try to analyze if it is needed for the child. For example, building blocks, stacking cups, or stacking rings. It's going to be helpful if the child going to build rapport with you. So I would say, well ahead, go ahead, do it. So analyze the activity before giving it to the child, rather than because we would have many parents come up to us and say, that child did this. Why is my child not doing? So each kid is different. They're gifted in many different ways, and we should respect that, and we should see at what level the child is performing because cognition varies from child to child. Like Ms. Divya said, a kid who's young can speak like as if they're 10 years old and 11 years old. I did have a kid here who was hardly say 5 years old, and he would speak like a 14-year-old to me. So it depends on their level of cognition and how conscious they are in taking. The last one would be no matter what, repeated learning makes it perfect, like it is registered in their head. To be very honest, it's like going to the gym. Working with autistic kids or any kids with um, challenges is like going to the gym. You can't just take up 5 kg dumbbell and expect you to build biceps one day. That's not going to work out. It's slow repetitions. Then you're going to increase. Then you're going to decrease it with higher intensity. Then slowly, you're going to integrate these senses for the child. Once these all come up, I mean, all these senses are integrated, you would definitely see a vast and dynamic change in the child, where the child would be happy to, receive consciously. And I had a personal experience with a child where the child was diagnosed with severe autism once, and he came up with he loads of behavior like head banging, and he would just bite you and all that. The key today, when God grace, the kid is speaking, he's doing very well, he's in school. I still keep in touch with the child. The reason I'm telling this is it's an experience which changed my way of working with the child, because in the end of the day, it's not me who helped the child come out. It was the mother who put her effort. She would sit day and night, follow the sensory diet, keep herself up to date. She never gave up, because usually we get burnt out as parents. We do definitely get burnt out, and in the process we would just sometimes they would quit. We are trying to constantly finances, but as I would say, uh, patience is key to success. definitely one day something would come up where the child would, communicate or find a way to, interact, because the kids do interact. It's just that they're not able to tell it right now because they're dysregulated and they're seeking for some other sense. Once they're regulated, definitely they would. So hopefully the webinar was helpful, and thank you.
Occupational therapist, along with speech therapy and ABA, they always question me, why OT? Right? Because most of the parents have this misconception that T is for any physiological problem like a physiotherapy, while it is much more than that. So I hope that today's session brings more clarity to the attendees that what an occupational therapist can do to work on children with autism, because I feel every aspect or every therapy has its own part. Now, if you do only speech therapy, you will all obviously see that the progress is much slower because the other aspects of sensory or the cognitive interventions are not taken care of. So when you have a comprehensive therapy wherein there is OT, there is cognitive intervention, there is ABA, which was for the behavior aspects of kids, and the speech therapy, everything collaborated together will definitely bring about much more changes and improvements in a child than going for one part of one therapy, right? So that's why we thought that let's just bring this together. We have a question about high functioning autism. Of course, there are high functioning autistic kids as well. Like I said, one of the cases that I said that he was a high functioning child. He can read really well, but then again, when it comes to the real core aspects of autism, which is social communication, there is a reason why autism is called as a social communication disorder, right? So it may or may not have intellectual deficit. Some kids are IQ wise, intelligence quotient wise, they're really high. Okay, but then the other aspects of communication, that's eye contact, expressive, receptive language, or behavior problems, that is a concern. So yes, there are high functioning and low functioning autistic kids both, which of course you will get to know when you do an elaborate psycho-educational or psychological evaluation or assessment. So you will know about the severity of autism, and also you will get to know if the child is high functioning or a low functioning autistic child. Any other question?
Oh, there's one question, Ms. Divya. My question is like, what should be very simple sensory diet for autism? Okay, that's a wonderful question. Unless until we do an evaluation of the child and see what sensory input is he seeking, no matter if he's severe, mild, moderate for the child, then we would be able to cater or form a sensory diet, especially for him, so that and it would be easy for you to follow. But when you're in the house and you're not able to do it, the best thing I would suggest is day-to-day task, day-to-day task, because I find parents finding it really difficult even for setup and cleanup. Like, for example, I had this recent conversation with a parent where the parent was telling me, he would just come, take in the toys, play with it, just throw it around, and he would just walk away. Then what are we doing as parents? I would suggest, like, okay, clean up. So we need to teach the child to clean up that and set up. So let's go for setup first. Once the child is done playing, one toy at a time. Then once the cleanup is done, we can proceed to the next one. Since we don't wait it out, most of the time we have challenging behavior coming up there. But most of the time, when we are firm with the child and we give some space for the child to work it out, it should be fine. The sensory diet can be based on things around us. And most of the time, since we live in Dubai, and we have access to loads of parks around. We can make good use of them. That should be easy.
Okay, one more thing that I would want to add when it comes to the executive functions when we're talking about planning. One of the simple tasks that you can do is write down for the child when the child is able to understand, or before the child is able to understand written language, have flashcards wherein the child is able to plan looking at the picture. So, for example, if it is a classroom setting, and what is the planning that he has to do for example, packing his bag, or what all things he has to carry to the school, right? So, have uh, flashcards or have things written. So then it's like basically you're training the brain, right? So what happens is that because of the neuro difficulties, all these things do not come naturally or do not come by observational learning, which usually happens, right? So we have to train the brain. So everything that we do, all the aspects, may it be neurofeedback, which is also called biofeedback. So everything is based on operational conditioning. Okay, so wherein you are training the brain to be accustomed to a task, right? So may it be attention. So if your attention is difficult for a child to focus, the tasks would be so in which the child's brain is trained to pay attention. Of course, it would start with very less timings, and then you will see the attention span goes on increasing. So this is basically how a cognitive intervention works, wherein you train. So now you're deliberately training the child to follow a particular plan. Okay, so that's how eventually then they because it becomes a part of their life. It becomes a normal activity for them, but before that, we'll have to train them to follow the particular steps. Okay. All right, so it's almost 7 minutes of the time. So anything that you want to ask or any questions which you have, you can always post it to the email or the WhatsApp where you got the link for the session, and we'll try to answer you all. Okay. All right, so thank you so much. Samuel, you are looking at the chats, or you want to
Yes,
answer?
yes. I just want to answer one question before we go. I'm so sorry. Let's just take a minute. Yeah. There's one question by Miss Smith, I guess. If handwriting of a 6-year-old autistic child isn't up to the mark of the peer with no concerns, why is OT suggested for a child? Isn't it something to do with spacing, formation, muscle strength? Mark of the peer with no concerns. Okay. Usually in schools, they would try to match kids with their peers. Of course, school is going to see a broad spectrum of what's happening around the class. They wouldn't specifically say, okay, I'm going to go more attention for the child. But since they raised this concern, the best thing would be like if the child is able to form letters like you have mentioned, I would always check if the child is able to attend and is able to focus on what he's doing. If he's able to do, then we are on clear sign of helping the child. And if the child's handwriting, like you said, isn't up to the peer, definitely we would have difficulties with attention, focus, his visual perception, and motor planning. Mainly motor planning would be a bigger issue because if the child is not attending and he's seeking for some of the sense, then it's going to be difficult in motor planning. And the pressure, mainly I have seen kids who would come up with loads and loads of what you call complaints where they give more pressure while they write and they would end up, forming letters in a horrible way. And sometimes you would have rivers of letters. And we would work on these steps on this. Like we, as OTs, we would strengthen, we would check on pre-writing skills, the muscle strength, then visual perception, and mostly then we would work on his attention and his focus. That's why they would have suggested the child to take OT sessions, I'm pretty sure. Thank you.
Everyone for joining us. I hope you have learned something from today's webinar, and we'll hope to have many such sessions with a lot of information on different kinds of problems, which makes it more easier for you to understand your kids much better and plan for the interventions accordingly. All right, thank you so much. Have a nice day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.